Efforts to promote equity and inclusion for minorities in STEM careers have a long way to go. We learned how AtlantiCare is helping to close that gap. It's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Choose to get lost in the woods to gain experience in forest management.
Choose to travel through time to understand the past.
Choose to soar to pursue a career in dance.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, and Stockton University. This edition of Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is brought to you by the HD Studios at the campus of Stockton University.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by AtlantiCare, offering primary, specialty, and urgent care, plus surgery and more. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.
Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. I'm happy to have as my guest, Christian Ragland. He is the Assistant Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at AtlantiCare. Christian, it's such a pleasure to have you. We've run around in the same circles, and certainly this is the first time that I have you on this show, but it's certainly a topic that we really want to get into in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So welcome to Latino Motion.
Thank you, Bert, for having me. And listen, I would be remiss if I did not mention it. It's been a pleasure working with you and supporting your work, and you supporting me, vice versa. I consider you not only a friend, but someone who has been one of my supporters. So thank you.
And when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you being the vice president of such a department, tell me what that really means and your role within AtlantiCare.
Sure. Strategically at AtlantiCare, we created a opportunity for my role to exist so that we create not only inclusive environments for our workforce, as well as our patients, because we know that people get better productivity when they're included, as well as we know patients heal better when they are included in their care. And then, of course, equity, meaning that we want to make sure that everyone has fair access to health outcomes, as well as even the workforce side. And then diversity is the culmination of all the many entities of AtlantiCare, whether it's the 6,000 employee workforce or even just the community stakeholders, where there are great leaders such as yourself who continue to help us identify areas for us to take our diversity, equity, inclusion strategy to the next level as AtlantiCare continues to work hard to be a leader in this space.
And I understand that your position is within the HR group. And one of the things that we really want to talk about is the real big gap that exists in STEM careers for Blacks and Latinos. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I thank you for bringing this up because this is a passion area of mine. And, eventually, it used to be where we would talk about this topic and almost not necessarily complain about it, but we would just bring awareness to it. But then I learned over the past couple of years, it's our responsibility to take charge and take the initiatives to fix it. And so, as you mentioned, Bert, there is a shortage of diversity in some of the STEM careers, right? If we just look at healthcare for a second, we look at your physicians, when you look at your nurses, your respiratory therapists, your medical lab techs, when you look at all of those clinical positions, you can see some disparity as pertains to Black and Brown, Hispanic individuals in those roles. But it also is an exciting time because it takes people like you and myself to be able to get into the trenches and connect those dots with the workforce that you can do this. You can go to medical school, you can go to college, whether that's through our scholarships that we raise money for, whether that's through the partnerships between, hospitals and community organizations, but creating opportunities for those students and those individuals who desire to go into the medical field of STEM careers is providing them cheerleaders such as ourselves to say that you can do it, instead of us saying every year there's a disparity. And so that's going to come with partnerships. It's going to come with community stakeholders. It's going to come with financial backing. But most importantly, it's going to come with innovation. And that's what I'm responsible for, is the innovation of the workforce development for our Black and Brown students.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little deeper about the gap, right? It appears that at least for some of the data that we've seen from the Pool Institute, that as far as careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, and we're talking about a period from 2017 to 2019, Black and Hispanic workers really continue to remain underrepresented. And here is the breakdown. For Black professionals, they make up 9% of STEM workers compared to 11 overall for the US. And for Hispanics, it's 8%. And for the Hispanic community, they make up 70% of the total US workforce. So you see there still remains a pretty big gap there. And in your view, what are some of the obstacles? And I think you alluded a little bit to it, but some of the obstacles that prevent Blacks and Latinos from getting into those STEM careers?
Absolutely. And I want to go back to what you mentioned with that disparity. If someone says, well, what's the big deal? Why is that important? Well, we need representation in healthcare. And the reason why seeing only a certain amount of people that reflect the communities that you and I are talking about in those fields is a very important priority that we must take up. And we want to make sure that the reflection of the community is seen in the workforce. But, you mentioned what obstacles. I think there are a couple. I think one goes with just general awareness. How many people even know outside of a doctor and a nurse some of the other clinical fields that we're talking about? How many people know what a respiratory therapist is, a medical lab tech, a computer engineer, or a pharmacist, these things, right? And so we have to create avenues, conduits by which we can educate the communities that we serve about these careers. The other can be lack of access to educational entities, right? We have a lot of colleges, but sometimes a lot of colleges in our local vicinities may not carry all of these programs. Now, with that being said, I commend a lot of our local community organizations and our educational entities for doing everything they can to bring those programs to the forefront in our community, because we don't want to see our community have to leave our area to go somewhere else to learn something and then not come back to the community. And so we want to make sure that we are creating access to educational outcomes and educational opportunities as well. Financial is another big one, right? A lot of people can't afford to go to college. This is where it's important that, we work with our community to identify not only scholarships, financial aid, but partnerships. At AtlantiCare, we pay 100% for the majority of those jobs that I just mentioned that we consider hot jobs that are lacking diversity. And so sometimes just a matter of getting people to understand, link up with an organization that's going to pay for you to go back to school so that you can come and be an asset to your community and the organization. And then finally, it goes back to representation again. We need to bring people that look like us to the classrooms, to the community centers, to the Boys and Girls Club, to the PALs, to the classroom at any level, and say, you can do it because these people do it. And so I think those are the obstacles, but I'm more excited about the opportunities that we have due to the collaborations, such as with our community organizations that are directly impacting our Black and Hispanic community members.
Yeah, you're right on point. Certainly, we all heard of institutional racism and the fact that, maybe mom and dad did not have a STEM career. So how do those kids learn about those STEM careers? And that's certainly all the things that you indicated in terms of making sure that we have people that look like them in terms of as role models, basically, right? To frame what these opportunities are for these kids.
Yep. And I love that, I don't want to say I love, but I'm glad that you brought up the systemic racism, because that's a real thing. There are systemic things that you can find in many organizational policies, many plans and strategies that may have existed 100 years ago and no one addressed. And then unfortunately, we see the end result that we are not reflected in a lot of those spaces. But it goes back to us as opportunistic individuals and leaders and people who have the ability to break down barriers to create equitable outcomes by just getting to the table and exposing it. And I think about, just today that the students, if I knew what I knew now, I'll say it this way. If I knew what I knew now, that what you and I are talking about, perhaps the trajectory of my life would be different. But at the end of the day, I'm in a position, you're in a position that we can change the trajectory of pretty much anyone who wants to listen. And so our job is to expose them to those opportunities. And these are good paying jobs. I don't want to just get on the theory of like how great this will be. These are great paying jobs that will allow someone to live and thrive in their very community.
Exactly. And we want to explore some of those programs, those opportunities that many of the youth in our communities have because of the great work that you're doing and other organizations. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Christian Ragland. He is the Assistant Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at AtlantiCare. And Christian, we were talking about the big gap that exists in STEM careers for Black and Latinos. And certainly we're all familiar with the Good Old Boy Network, right? And it's, you started off, you brought your son in, you brought your relatives in, and didn't make a lot of room for the diversity, that the demographic change that we continue to see. And AtlantiCare, through your efforts, you're doing something to get to those kids that maybe their parents didn't have the opportunity to explore health careers. Tell me how you're going about it.
Sure. Thank you, Bert. And so one of the first initiatives I want to talk about is what I dubbed the high school hiring blitz. And so I was in the gym one day last year and I had this thought. My greatest thoughts come when I'm on the treadmill. And so I had this thought. I said, what if we went to the high school students earlier and hired them for entry-level roles and then gave them a career plan that said, once you're hired in an entry-level role, you will enroll in schools such as nursing, respiratory, PT, physical therapy, and we will pay for it. And so we did that. And so AtlantiCare has 3 teen centers, one at Atlantic City High School, one at Oakcrest High School, and one at Buena High School. And so I partnered with those teen centers. And for 4 weeks, I met with about 60 seniors who were graduating high school of diverse background, a lot of Hispanic, a lot of African Americans, and as well as some other ethnicities and other just different dimensions of difference. But we met with them for 4 weeks prior to their high school graduation. We brought the hiring managers to the high school and we interviewed them for jobs such as PCA tech, which is sort of a nursing assistant. We brought them in for patient access, which is the registration piece of the hospital, those who are interested in dietary, those interested in food, and of course, security. And so we hired 34 individuals, high school seniors, and we hired them before they even graduated high school. And once they graduated high school, they started work at AtlantiCare. But here's the best part. Those jobs that we just talked about that there's disparity in, where there's not a lot of diversity, those are the students that we are paying to go back to school for those jobs in our local community. And so that's, how we're going to engage the students earlier. And so that they know that before they even have to make a decision of life after high school graduation, we gave them an easy out to go right to work. And here's the best part. When it comes to health equity, we're also providing benefits. So now these students know that they have to get a primary care physician the moment they graduate high school so that they are not lapsing in any type of coverage as it pertains to keeping up on their physicals and their screenings. The other thing that we do is we partner with many community organizations that are diverse in nature, diverse by culture, and we bring in these opportunities for doctors and for techs and for therapists to talk about their careers so that we hit every community. Our employee resource groups, which are comprised of about 450 AtlantiCare employees.
Yeah, Christian, before we get into the resource groups, I do want to touch base upon that. Just your experience for the summer program, right? You said you had 34. This was the first year that you ran this. What was the reaction from these students that participated this past summer?
It's so funny, Bert. I talked to a couple today. They are just in love with the idea of they're working at a hospital and they're getting their tuition paid for. And they know that they have a job when they graduate, that a job that's going to pay them well and also provide them the opportunity to take care of their family and live in the community. The other experience that I wanted to mention, we talked about this with some nursing leaders, is the benefit of catching this high school students before they graduate is you get to mold them into the employee that you need them to be per, giving them an orientation of, hey, you haven't had an experience in the real world yet from a workforce standpoint before you graduated high school. Now, they may have had small jobs, right? working in the boardwalk, working in McDonald's, Wawa. But we're giving you an opportunity to take a job that's going to give you direct access to not only your community, but also everyone's community. And we're teaching you how to deal with dimensions of difference. And so it's a source of pride for these young people as their parents are saying things like, well, how did you get into AtlantiCare? I've been trying for 10 years to get into the hospital. Well, we got them early. And I think we're showing dividends that these students are so passionate about the work, and they're doing a great job, and we only know the future is great for them because we are putting them in positions to do that.
So I know that we had a youth retreat through the Hispanic Association of Atlantic County, and you were a big hit in terms of the kids coming to you, talking about those opportunities for summer internships. And it's something that a number of other companies are doing. I know that Atlanta City Electric is also doing the same, and other companies are really joining and getting on board. Tell me, is this something that you plan to continue to do? I mean, 34 is a big number. You're going to be able to continue that same level of intensity.
Yeah, I'm aiming for 60 this year, Bert. This is going to be our yearly project, and we were able to put that together within 4 weeks. Now that we have a whole year to plan, we already started planning, and we have some really big goals, and the word is out because the juniors in high school last year who saw the seniors get those jobs are already thinking, I have a plan. I'm going to go to AtlantiCare. And so I'm excited about what we have ahead of us and working with my colleagues to put that off.
Now, let's talk about in terms of the employee base that you already have. And I know that as far as DE&I, it's an important component of the life of employees at AtlantiCare. Yeah, I know you've also embraced the what we call employee resource groups, and you have one which is ALMA. And by the way, ALMA is helping us with bringing AtlantiCare individuals here to talk about health issues and health concerns. How are you engaging the employee base on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Absolutely. Well, AtlantiCare, first and foremost, we have a core value of inclusion, which means I can bring my authentic self to work every day. I'm welcomed. And so we understand that people give better effort and productivity when they feel included and they feel welcome. And so we can't do any of this work if we have a workforce that does not feel that they belong. And so the first thing is that we make sure people feel that they belong via employee resource groups, via engaging them to come back into the community, or also just celebrating our dimensions of difference or our diversity. And so then we utilize our employee resource groups to give us the tentacles that we need in various communities. For me, I'm not Hispanic, right? And I don't speak, fluent Spanish, but I have an employee resource group that's completely entrenched in their community and can communicate. And all I have to do is provide the resources. And that's how I've met great people like Bert, who also sits on our AtlantiCare board, again, who has guided us. And so we do that with various communities. And so, again, inclusion is taking what makes us different and putting it all together so that we get a better result. And that's what our job is, to make sure our employee workforce creates an environment where they all know that they're welcome and they are needed.
Yeah, very, very important. Certainly, when Laurie Herndon, who's the president, CEO of AtlantiCare, brought up this diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. It certainly was something that's very well welcome, very much needed. And what's the reaction you're seeing from the employee base? I mean, in terms of making that environmental change, if you will, towards a more inclusive workplace?
Well, I think it's been great. I'm going to tell you why. I think AtlantiCare has always been great with being good people. But I also think the strategic way we did this when we rolled out our new DE&I strategy was not to point the finger at any person or any group of people and say that you are this or you are that. It was finding ways to connect people first, learning that we have more similarities in our differences. And once we were able to create a culture where we found out that we have more similarities in our differences, we were able to create a culture where people respect and they love learning about different things. And so now our employee resource groups are full of people who may not be Hispanic, but they join ALMA because they want to learn more. They may not be African American, but they join Legacy because they want to learn more. They may not be gay or a veteran or a woman in leadership. And so it's creating that inclusion and cohesiveness that says we value you first, and then we'll bring everything else to the table.
But this is an excellent point to end this segment, because we want to continue discussing this a little further. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Christian Ragland. He is the Assistant Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at AtlantiCare. And Christian, we covered a lot in terms of the gap that exists in STEM careers, a lot of great opportunities, a lot of great projects and initiatives that you have started. We want to talk a little bit more about the gap that exists in terms of health for Black and Latinos and other minorities, the health equity component and your engagement with that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bert. And so health equity is a very big, passionate priority of mine, in that we see that there are disparities that systemically have always been around in our Black and Brown and Hispanic communities, as well as sometimes we just don't have awareness about. And so at AtlantiCare, I'm working every day with our providers and our clinicians to work with our Hispanic community leaders and communities, as well as our African American communities, to address things such as hypertension, diabetes, asthma, Medicaid and Medicare readmissions. And somebody may say, well, what's that? Well, if you don't know, hospitals get judged or get evaluated upon, how many readmissions of people come through the ER doors that could have been prevented if we did some things to help, whether that's education. And so, working with the Hispanic community leaders has been great, because we are identifying through data where the areas of need are. And then once we identify where the disparity and where those needs are, then we provide resources. Then we provide access to screenings. Then we talk about, I met a woman today who is Hispanic, and she was just told that she has diabetes. And, she was sharing with me some things. And I shared with her that we're doing some work with our Hispanic communities and our Hispanic community organizations to make sure that, we are creating a culture of understanding where health equity relies. But the big piece is that health equity is about access. So no matter how much I talk about these things, the key priority is, do our communities feel that they can go to their hospital, they can go to their primary care physician, they can go to their specialist and get access to care to help them with some of these things. And that's what my job is about, creating access points so that we meet our communities halfway or even full way to get them the care that they need.
And you mentioned two great points, right? The access, obviously, it's a big piece, making sure that there's a welcoming environment for people, perhaps who don't speak English, that to be able to come and get help. But the other part of that is having people in those hospitals and those clinics that look like them, that are able to communicate effectively by them. And then the second part that you cover was the fact of education, right? Educating our communities on what resources are available, how to get help. That's very critical as well.
Oh, and I love that you brought that up. That's the beauty of tying the workforce piece with the health equity piece. If we create opportunities for our communities that look like us to work in hospitals, reflecting the patients that we serve, the easier we'll see cultural competency, the easier we'll see health equity, because then we'll have a workforce that's designed strategically to be able to be everything for everyone that comes through the doors. One of my favorite things to see is when our team utilizes their employees that can speak a different language. And so when someone comes in that speaks Spanish, I love when they call on the one colleague that says, hey, can you translate for me? And that's really what inclusion is. You don't have to know everything, but you have to know who your resources are. But at the end of the day, when people feel that they're being treated fairly and culturally competently, they heal better, they feel better, their length of stay is determined differently. And so our job is to make sure that we're not only recruiting and hiring and developing a workforce that reflects the community, but we're also educating the community, particularly our Black and Hispanic communities, that they have access to care and they need to know where those resources are.
And I know you already gave my disclosure that I'm a board member of AtlantiCare, but let me tell you, AtlantiCare does a great job in doing the outreach. And I'm going to go back to the COVID, and I know that we worked with ALMA, which is your Latino ERG group, and getting the word out. Hey, vaccinations are available, trying to create the slots so that when there is a underrepresentation of Latinos getting the vaccination or getting tested, that they're there, that we have that representation, and trying to advance more education in terms of the vaccination that's needed. So applaud all the efforts certainly the AtlantiCare is taking to do the outreach, and you continue to do that.
Yeah, and again, we couldn't do it without partners like yourself to help us identify those areas, but it's going to take a collective of everyone highlighting where the needs are. And it's not an ego thing. It's not self-aggrandizement. This is not for us to get on, Latino Motion and talk about how well and great we are, but it's about making sure that everyone who we call neighbors has access to care, as well as access to employment opportunities that will allow them to have longevity in the communities that we have grown up in.
So let's talk a little bit about Christian Ragland and turn. What drove you to a career in the medical field?
Awesome. So I'm a graduate of Penn State University in 2011. I was on my way to law school, accepted into law school. And the day I was selecting my housing for law school, I had a mentor who told me, don't go to law school at this time in 2011, because we're going through a little recession. And so I got a call. I got my master's degree in public administration instead. And I got a call from a headhunter, which is a professional executive recruiter. They said, do you like talking to people? And I said, absolutely. They said, great. You'll be great for human resources. And I said, what is that? And since then, that was 2011, I worked for a nursing recruitment company, and I learned and loved the idea of not only connecting care to patients, but giving people opportunities to change their economy. And so I've been in human resources for about 11 years, 5 years at AtlantiCare, and just been fortunate to get into DE&I with Lori Herndon, our CEO, and take on this leadership role. But when you ask me what drove me to this, I go back to something that many people may know, or may not know. My aunt, my grandfather's sister, is Sister Jean. And so for many years as a child, I spent a lot of time at Aunt Jean's kitchen serving people. And I am just extremely elated that I have my own path to help people.
That's a great prodigy, certainly with Sister Jean and all the great work she's done, and certainly you're following in those footsteps. What advice do you give for folks who aren't sure about healthcare and entering into the healthcare field?
Do your own research. Be proactive. You can't expect everyone to know everything. And so I was that kid where I just did my research. I went out and talked to people who were in the field. I created my own internships before internships were even created. But I would say be proactive and stay hungry, and also connect with people who are doing exactly what you want to do. And there's something that I like to call with the young people, begin to project what your future, or forecast what your future wants to look like, so that you begin to work and walk towards that. We call that self-fulfilling prophecy. When you think about something so much that it actually starts to happen, and it's nothing magical about it, but it's your body telling you, you really want to do this so bad, let's make this happen. And so I'm all about making sure you're proactive about your future.
And I know you talked about the high school students, and I often think that we even have to start younger in the middle schools.
Absolutely.
And even elementary schools. But this has been great. We have had a great discussion, and I want to leave the final word to you in terms of what it means to work at AtlantiCare.
AtlantiCare, number one, we have a model, building healthy communities. For me, I am building healthy communities for my 3 children who are small now, but I'm hoping that as they grow, matriculate into every level of their lives, they'll know that their father continues to make a difference for the communities that they live in. And so everyone has that same opportunity when they come and join AtlantiCare or join any entity in Atlantic County. And I want to say, listen, we may close our offices some days, but the job boards are never closed. And so you can go to AtlantiCare.org and you can apply for a job. If you have any difficulty, please reach out to me as well. And I'll make it easy. Diversity@AtlantiCare.org is how you can reach me. And I'm always willing to help.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us here on Latino Motion. And thank you at home for once again being part of our Latino Motion family.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by AtlantiCare, offering primary, specialty, and urgent care, plus surgery and more. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.